to the Elusive Truth with Rich and sometimes Larry. I swear, that never gets old. Anyway, today's show I was going to do on banking. Apparently, there's so much to it, and I'm not a banker, but I am suggesting that you guys really need to look into this because this could be a big problem. And unfortunately, it's worldwide now. But we'll get to that in the end of our show. To start off with, we're going to talk about Portland, because Portland is not getting any better, and it's actually getting worse. They reelected Ted Wheeler, so he's not going to do anything. Nothing's going to change. Well, here, listen for yourself. We're going to start off with a fluff piece from local Fox News, who's going to give you a good idea what's going on. But again, it's fluff. They don't want to give you the hard facts. So have a listen.
By bullet, gun violence now plagues Portland like never before. The shootings leave their mark on the city with death, injury, destruction, and fear.
Tonight, armed with some new information about shootings citywide, we're taking you to the one local neighborhood that bears the brunt of the violence. Fox 12's Kendra Kent is live for us tonight in Hazelwood with more. Kendra?
Well, Nora and Pete, 5 years ago, there were fewer than 80 reported shootings across all of Portland. But just the last 3 years here in Hazelwood, there have been reports of 372 shootings. And if you live in this area of East Burnside and 122nd, you hear these shootings all the time. And that's because this intersection, these streets around here, were the most concentrated areas of shootings in this neighborhood last year. It was a memorial that grew through January as family and friends of Amado Santos, better known as Nacho, gathered and grieved.
Everybody that loved him came and check up on us.
But now it's February. The funeral is over. The flowers are wilting. The message is fading.
Everybody went back to their lives. And so right now we're just kind of on our own. And so that's when it gets to us.
What was once surreal has turned to crushing devastation for Santos's sisters and family.
The pain that we feel, it's not, you can't put words into it.
The 24-year-old gas station attendant was the first person to die in a shooting this year in Portland. Nacho was killed in the same neighborhood where he lived and worked, Hazelwood, the very same neighborhood that saw the most shootings citywide last year.
Why all this violence? What do they get out of it?
Police say there were 137 shootings here in 2022. That averages out to a shooting every 2.5 days in an area that's only 4 square miles. Those shootings last year hurt or killed 36 people, and at least 564 bullets were recovered on these same streets that some 25,000 Portlanders call home.
It's nothing new to us anymore, and that's sad.
It just hurt, because at the end of the day, we doing it to ourselves.
I don't feel safe at all here anymore.
It's the reality for people in Hazelwood. The Fox 12 investigators analyzed newly released Portland police data. And we recently rode along with the cops who see the violent aftermath firsthand.
We're actually driving right into an area right now that has had quite a few shootings.
And our investigation has revealed what appears to be the epicenter of the violence, the most dangerous spot of the most dangerous neighborhood here in Hazelwood when it comes to shootings.
122nd and East Burnside.
This intersection and just beyond takes the brunt of the city's bullets. We found there were 27 shootings within a half-mile radius here last year. Now there are homes, businesses, a medical center, the MAX train, and an elementary all nearby. And we wanted to know how people are coping with the violence.
I mind my own business. I don't pay attention to anybody.
Those who live here are not surprised by the statistics. They live it every day. Kelly Brady lives right at the corner. He hears and sees a lot.
Maybe 1 in the morning, 2 in the morning, something. And all of a sudden you walk toward the street. It was quiet night. Bam, 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 bam. Nothing.
From mothers picking up their children at the nearby elementary.
I won't let them be outside unless I'm there. They can't go walk around the neighborhood. That's not going to happen right now.
To students who've witnessed shootings themselves.
I saw it outside my window.
Fox 12 spent hours in Hazelwood talking about gun violence with those who live here. Some neighbors are afraid to go out at night. Some wish they could move. Others simply chalk it up to life on Portland's gritty east side.
I've seen it all. I've experienced it myself. It's just, it is what it is.
Isaiah Payne lives in Gresham, but he spends much of his time traveling around Hazelwood and surrounding neighborhoods making house calls as a barber. He told us he's lost friends and family members to gun violence.
I feel like it's just a lot of people get left out here. You know what I'm saying? Just kind of, I wouldn't even necessarily say neglected, just kind of forgot of.
We met 17-year-old Brandon Harajan Zavalza, a senior at David Douglas High School. There were at least 6 shootings outside his apartment building last year. He says he witnessed a shooting right outside his door in 2021.
I'm not exactly affected by the gun violence. It's just kind of a thing that happens in the background. You know, I'm focused on other things. I want to go to college. I want to get a full ride somewhere.
The difference between day and night here in Hazelwood changes the perception of safety as well as the reality. Most of the shootings happen after dark. Which is why Officer Michelle Petty and other members of Portland Police's focused intervention team work the night shift. The 12 officers and 2 sergeants of the so-called FIT team are dedicated to investigating shootings and use intelligence, tips, and tactics to try to prevent them.
So if we can reduce the amount of guns that are on the street, that can hopefully provide a safer community.
We spent some time with Officer Petty and other FIT officers in Hazelwood, as well as other neighborhoods on Portland's east side.
It's hard to make a turn on any street in the city and not have some sort of connection to a shooting that we've gone to.
On this particular night, officers kept their eyes peeled for familiar cars or faces, running plates to see what's stolen.
We're still going westbound division.
Good spike.
Popping tires when suspects try to evade them. During our ride along, we were there for all of the above as police stopped drivers with stolen cars, switched plates, and suspended licenses. Officers confiscated drugs and a gun from one woman.
Fentanyl pills. This is heroin and a jammed firearm.
It's all part of the strategy to try to stay one step ahead of the violence. And it's no easy feat, as the Bureau will only investigate shootings where someone is killed or hurt.
With thousands of shootings happening in one year, one team with 12 officers can't manage that, you know.
Portland police estimate at least half of all shootings in the city are related to gang violence. Other shootings are often tied to robberies, people experiencing homelessness, or domestic violence.
Going to these calls and people in the community that witness these things, we're actually seeing this victim and we are hearing their painful cries or hearing, like a family after they've lost a loved one.
People of color are much more likely to be impacted.
It touches my heart in a way because a lot of these victims reflect people that look like me or look like my family. And so it's challenging. But mostly I would say we're seeing a lot of African-American males that are victims of gun violence in our city.
In Hazelwood, more than half the population is white. Yet most of those who've lost their lives here are Black or Hispanic. Families ripped apart and forever changed.
As you can see the pictures behind us, he had a beautiful smile.
For Amado Santos's family, they'll never think of these shootings as simply statistics. It's personal. The toll measured in grief, loss, and love for a young man gone too soon.
We made a promise to my brother the day that he got buried that we're going to get justice for him.
And Santos's family believes that he was mistaken for a gang member because he was wearing a blue bandana at the time of the shooting. They say he's never been involved in gangs, but they do believe that is why he was targeted. Now, the family is asking for help in solving the case. There has been no arrest yet of that shooter. Anyone who can help should call Portland police. Reporting live in Southeast Portland, Kendra Kent, Fox 12 Oregon.
A very enlightening report, Kendra. Thank you very much. Let's
see what I mean? Nothing to worry about. Yes, it's tragic. There's a death, a family, a funeral. Guns are out of control. And just get the guns off the streets and everything will be fine. It did not address anything about the illegal or the legal use of drugs throughout the state of Oregon. And it's now become a mecca here. Or how come the prosecutors don't charge anybody for any of these crimes? That's why it's happening. They're letting them do whatever they want. Again, I just wanted to show you everything's fine. Don't worry about it. We have the 12 officers. They'll take care of the guns and we'll be able to move on. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. So here, for my next piece, we're going to go to Fox Business. Portland is turning into an insane asylum. Imagine that.
So what can be done to save the city? Joining me now to discuss, attorney and host of the Rational in Portland podcast, Kristen Olson. Kristen, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Kennedy. It's an honor to be here.
So I grew up there. I still go back to see my parents and other family members, but I will not go anywhere near downtown Portland. It is so gross. And the city has done everything wrong. What tops your list of what they've totally screwed up?
I mean, I think I'd have to say the most serious, which is the fact that our homicides are out of control.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's any coincidence that we are the only city in America where a third of our homicides are committed by and against homeless people. It's this confluence of decriminalization of drugs, guns everywhere, because we've got this lawless, free-for-all culture. We've got open-air drug markets. The police have pulled back after being defunded to the tune of $27 million. They weren't fired, but all these programs were cut. The ones who could retire did. Mm-hmm. The ones who could move did. They were tired of being treated like garbage and watching their city burn to the ground for 180 so days. And in the meantime, the cartels and the drug and gun runners have moved in. And now we've got what someone might call homeless encampments. These are really open air drug markets, and they're frankly open-air insane asylums. And because as anyone might know who's ever tried to sleep on a sidewalk, that is not done by functional people. So that's the majority of the people that we have out of the sidewalk. And we are an outlier in terms of cities in the United States for the amount of homeless that are being killed and shot at with guns. They are told, the police are told to assume that the homeless are armed. I went on a police ride-along, and I was there for training. You get to sit in on training, and the officers that I talked to said we are all trained to assume that all of these homeless people are armed. Now, that makes us an absolute outlier in the United States. And who would have thought that this weird, fun, hippie place would be filled with this many guns? We're supposed to be some kind of anti-gun utopia, right? We just passed an anti-gun measure on this last ballot in November of 2022, and a lot of good that has done us. So we've had that 6 kids shot outside of their high schools, Kennedy.
Yeah,
allegedly a 15-year-old shot one of them.
It's horrible. But I want to touch on something quickly because we're running out of time. So
please,
I am like you. I would like to see drugs decriminalized in this country, and I do think we have a problem with over-incarceration. This is not how to fix it. And when you talk about the Portugal model has a very important social working aspect where people are identified and they're taken out of the system that they are in, instead of appeasing that system and telling people that they can sleep wherever they want. Homelessness has exploded there. Everything they are doing wrong. It is the opposite of the Portugal model. It is incredibly inhumane. They are throwing people away. They don't have plans to make it better. And there's no acknowledgement that they have ruined the city. Last word.
Well, that's exactly right. So Measure 110 was the decriminalization of drugs measure that was sold to us by the Drug Policy Alliance, which is based in New York City, and Oregon was the guinea pig for this, and we fell for it. It was sold to us as a Portugal model. And as you said, we didn't do anything that Portugal did. We didn't open up detox and rehab centers. We seem to have no interest in addiction recovery in Portland. And so instead what we have are just open-air drug markets, and it's a
heroin use rates in Portugal went down by 90%. That is not happening because everything they're doing, they are doing it wrong, and they're going to set the entire freedom movement back another 20 years at least. Kristen, thank you so much for your time. Stay rational, stay weird. Thank you, dear.
Now we're getting closer to the truth. But unfortunately, you get rid of the guns, pass a law, so the citizens, the good citizens, don't have the right to have a gun. Who has them? The criminals and these druggies and the gangs. And normal citizens are now fair game because they're unarmed. That's one point of it. And unfortunately, there's a lot more to it. So with that, we're going to move on to CBS News from Canada. Oregon decriminalized drugs 2 years ago. How's it going?
This is Portland, Oregon, 2 years after decriminalizing personal amounts of hard drugs. The open drug use, the deaths, worse than ever.
Where are we here now?
This is Skidmore Fountain, which has been called Fentanyl Fountain by some of the folks that we've interacted with.
Police officer David Bayer patrols downtown. Measure 110, the ballot initiative that brought in decriminalization, changed his job.
See this guy right here?
Yeah.
Yeah, watch this.
What's he doing?
He's probably smoking fentanyl. See that?
Yeah.
And we're like, we're in what's basically a police car. It's unmarked, but like, we're pretty obviously the police. Hi there, put that knife away, please. What are you smoking?
Betty.
Okay, just powder fentanyl?
Yeah.
Is that what you drop right there?
Yeah.
Right there? Yeah. Can you pick that up so someone else doesn't find it or a kid doesn't find that, please?
Under Measure 110, Bayer writes a $100 ticket. The fine will be waived if this man phones a treatment hotline.
Hey, man. No, number to call in the back for treatment. Right on. Good luck to you.
Do you think he'll call?
Most likely, yeah. About a 50-50 shot, yeah.
A recent audit found just 1% of people receiving tickets have actually called the hotline.
My partner's calling me, asking for Narcan.
Okay. And that means
someone's overdosing. Yeah, he just asked for it on the radio.
How often does this happen?
Every day.
But still, 2 people a day die from drug overdoses in Oregon. British Columbia's death toll is 3 times that. Decriminalization hasn't brought those numbers down.
Chase, wake up, buddy. There you go. Thanks.
Now I can say we used it.
He's gotten Narcan 4 milligrams in the left nostril.
In the first year, opioid overdose deaths rose 52%.
When did you guys last deal with him? Yesterday. Do you guys Narcan him?
Yes.
Okay. So he's up and off. It's very likely we see him again.
Sad.
Yeah. Yep. And I've known that guy for 3 years, and I've frankly seen his decline because he used to just use meth, and now every day he's out here using fentanyl, and this is the second day in a row we've Narcaned him. We're blocking traffic. Let's get on. Let's get moving here.
A few blocks away, another patrol. Anisha Cochran-Dumas is a recovering addict and peer counselor.
That's a large.
She believes Measure 110 will save lives eventually.
Before, we couldn't afford to come and meet them where they are. Like, hey, we know you using, but we still want to give you something of value to make it through this day.
Everything she's handing out was purchased thanks to Measure 110.
Do you want some panties?
Money from cannabis sales goes to groups serving people with addiction.
And I feel like these people are me because I used to be out here too. This is the park where I used to get high in, you know what I'm saying? And when I come through here and they see me, they know I used to get high here because they used to get high with me. So when they see me, they feel hope. Because they be like, if she can do it, I could do it.
She says getting clean takes time. Paul Stromer tried for decades. He's 9 months sober.
It's all about the individual, I mean, and what they want for themselves. When it comes down to addicts, you can't force them to get clean. They got to want to do it themselves.
But in Portland's downtown, patience is wearing thin. Paul Watts owns a graffiti cleaning business.
I have the Canadian National News with me.
Oh, hi.
Hey, guys. They're decriminalizing all hard drugs.
Don't do it.
Yeah, how come?
What do you think?
You tell me.
It encourages them to do more.
Yeah, are you seeing that happen here?
Seen it.
Yeah.
It's exploded.
Has it, eh?
And it's gotten cheaper.
Police see increased demand, increased supply, and Bayer says that could happen in British Columbia too.
We've talked to folks last week that say they're buying for $1 a pill, or they're trading aluminum cans, which are worth 10 cents in Oregon.
Aluminum cans.
I had a guy last week be like, oh yeah, like these guys that I buy my drugs from will take cans in exchange for drugs.
That's cheap.
It's extremely cheap, yeah.
Now we're getting closer to the truth. But the drug epidemic in Portland is out of control. And more importantly, you weren't able to see But in the beginning of this clip, the gentleman that they were talking to, he had a glass pipe and he's just smoking it right there on the sidewalk with a bunch of other people in front of the police. And they give you a $100 ticket that goes away if you make a phone call. For my next piece, we're going to go to Fox News, The Five. Taxpayers pay for the homeless life, and it's not just in Portland. To make things even better, our newly elected governor, Governor Kotex, wants to pay the homeless $1,000 a month just so they stick around. You know what that means? The rest of the country is coming to Portland to live on the streets. Have a listen.
It's never been easier to be a homeless person in Democrat-run cities. Why bother getting a job and cleaning yourself up when you can enjoy free meals and get high all day? Thanks to liberal policies. Portland alone has over 700 encampments. And one woman there is actually bragging about the perks of living on the streets.
How is it like being homeless in Portland?
It's a piece of cake, really. I mean, that's why you probably got so many out here, because they feed you 3 meals a day. You don't have to do but stay in your tent or party, or if you smoke a lot of dope, you can do that. It's like you wake up, you go eat at Blanche, get high. Go eat at Blanche for lunch, get high. Go eat dinner, get high. And that's all you do all day long, every day.
Doesn't feel like that's really helping anybody.
It's not. That's why you see all the tents.
I spoke with a homelessness outreach volunteer who shot that video, and he says it's time for some tough love.
Someone who's in the middle of their addiction is going to continue to say yes to you if you just keep handing them stuff, right? But what if you stop handing them stuff and says, look, I expect you to meet me halfway now. You know, change is difficult. But what I've found is by giving a homeless person responsibility, they take that responsibility.
So
and
you're
it's
saying
beautiful.
You usually don't hear that, Greg, from liberal politicians.
Well, first, I want to start with the preface that we all have to do, which is we're not talking about people on the street who are there not by choice, right? But however, we are starting to see that is not even close to the majority of homeless right now. It is the transient lifestyle has now become glamping. Yep. It's like you can go, you can get a tent, you can live there, and this is what happens. And I think what's happening is even the outreach, the volunteers, the people that work with the homeless are saying, man, this is just a scheme. This is now people are just doing it because they can live above and beyond civil society, which I get. You know, I understand what she's talking about. No boss, no bills, no mortgages, free meds, free meals. But there's got to be some reciprocity to society. Don't make our lives hell. You can have your commune in the desert. Hell, I'll help pay for that. But you can't be on the street defecating. You can't, scare the crap out of our kids, right? You can't make our lives a living hell. We get it. We understand that that you don't want to live by our rules, but then you don't get to live with us, right? It's like it's like the parents cutting off the drug addict and kicking them out of the house, no matter how much they love them. Cities have to do this. They're homeless by choice. They are not your children. They are not your responsibility. We are paying for that responsibility, and it's their lifestyle. We are supporting a lifestyle. It's time to stop. I will pay to create that lifestyle as an experiment somewhere in the desert. Tents galore, drugs galore. Hell, I'll visit. I'll be the mayor.
What do they call that big party in the desert where everybody...
Burning Man.
Burning Man.
Yeah, this will be Smelly Man.
Yeah. So Greg says, we're all paying for this. The taxpayers in Portland are paying for free tents. They're paying for free needles. They're paying for free food. Mm-hmm. Why stop? Why get off the streets?
Well, and also there was just an election, and the voters there decided to continue with the leadership that they had. So part of it for me is like, well, okay, then this is what you have decided to do, local decision making. And you get to decide, and that's the case. Now, I do not think it's compassionate to allow people to live like that. And I think that the guest you had is right, that tough love is compassionate. That's what you know for everybody. And these drugs, some of them, they make you not care about your personal condition. So you're happy to be in a tent. And you could be in a city like Denver where they don't enforce the no tent policy. And now you've got tents everywhere. Or look at Washington, D.C. You leave Union Station and there's tents everywhere. That should be unacceptable. And our police officers, one, they should not be social workers. They shouldn't have to be. But they also should be given the power that they need to move these people on into care if they need it. And the last thing I would say is it's also not compassionate to the families who are worried about their loved ones who are out there living on the street and are able to do so without having to come home.
Judge. You know, I have to tell you, I have been very critical of Mayor Eric Adams, but he did one good thing, and I want to give him credit for it. Eric Adams he's trying to get the homeless into hospitals, mental health facilities. And there's a lot of pushback from the left, from people who say, oh, it's not fair. They say specifically that it is inhumane to force them to go into a mental hospital. But he's got it under the umbrella of if they can't take care of themselves, it might be a danger to themselves or others, then the police have the right to take them into a mental health facility where immediately they get a psychiatric evaluation and they could stay there, not unlike what I did as a judge. Now, one of the other things that, and this is our fault, it is our fault. In Missouri, it is against the law to sleep on the street. In New York now, Eric Adams is saying, if you appear to have a mental illness, we're going to pull you off the street involuntarily and put you in a mental health facility. And the problem is people in Oregon, they get free food. They get a lax drug policy where they allow them to have LSD, meth, heroin and everything else and cocaine. And they take it as a violation, like getting a traffic ticket. And they suffered more fatalities in terms of overdoses than they had ever. So the bottom line is this. As a society, we have to make a decision. Are we going to tolerate it or not?
Are we going to tolerate it or not?
Somewhere in the middle, the 50% that your guest said, I think makes sense, saying you've got to give us some, and we're going to continue to give you some. And it's not saying tomorrow you can't come back here, right? But there have to be, standards. There have to be goals that you meet in order to keep getting benefits. That's how it works in the welfare system. And I think on the Eric Adams front, that policy, when I first saw it, I thought, oh, this is a good thing because it feels dangerous there, especially in the subways and things like that. And I think if you marry up using police officers with social workers to have those conversations with people who are mentally ill, because that's really the problem, that we have mentally ill people on the street, then I think that we could probably do a lot of good with that and people could get the care that they need. But one of the main problems is we don't have enough shelter beds for people anymore. So when Bloomberg was mayor of New York, we had a bed for every single homeless person in the city if they wanted it. And there were tons of vans that would drive around. You've probably seen them, picking people up if they wanted a ride, especially on cold nights, but just in general. And we don't have that anymore. Under de Blasio, it surpassed the number of beds that we have. And now it's astronomical, especially considering what's going on with migration, mental illness.
We're not going to build enough beds to get ourselves out of this problem.
No, but you have to have somewhere that people can go that's safe.
Oh, it's not a tent.
Amazing what has happened to our cities. And this is in dozens of cities across the United States. I'm not sure about Europe and the rest of the countries because, once again, the media doesn't let us know what's going on. But as you're hearing, it's crazy. And there's so much to it. It's not just one thing. It really does come down to basically the Democratic narrative and their inability to keep us normal, regular citizens safe and going to take care of everybody else while we foot the bill. For my last piece on this Portland type debacle that we're in, this is going to come from Liberal Hive Mind. He has a YouTube channel and he likes exposing the hypocrisy of the left. Again, it's not just Portland. Portland is leading the way for this craziness, this outlawlessness, and the inability to enjoy city life anymore. So, Liberal Hive Mind, have a listen.
Hey guys, welcome to the Liberal Hive Mind, a channel solely focused on exposing the abundant hypocrisy of the left. This right here is why the state model is just so great. It's almost like a form of capitalism. Every state kind of represents a different company being ran in a different way. Different leadership, different philosophies, different policies. And of course, as we know, the beauty of capitalism, it creates choice for the consumer. Wacko leftist communist policies only work if they're implemented by force, in a linear top-down system where the consumer or the citizen doesn't have the choice, doesn't have options. Well, in the beautiful world of capitalism, people have a plethora of options. In the United States market, there's 50 different options, and the trends are very clear when it comes to the American consumer. The states that are going woke are very simply going broke, literally, as tens of thousands and in some cases hundreds of thousands on the state level are abandoning the wokest of the woke, and the next state that seems to be in utter freefall is none other than Oregon, and specifically thanks to Portland. Let's continue to cover and talk about this phenomenon. We've got some stuff to get into, so let's roll the tape. Alright folks, so here's today's report on Portland, Oregon from Fox News. It's what's being described as, quote, a downward spiral.
Violent crime, filthy streets, high taxes, and homeless camps. They're seemingly everywhere, but they've got folks in Portland, Oregon fleeing, the population plunging in a downward spiral after decades of rapid growth. Dan Springer's got more on all of this. When is the last time that Portland actually lost population, Dan?
Yeah, John, it was 1987, and that was a one-year blip. So Portland really has been on a roll for 4 decades, and now they've lost population 3 years in a row, and experts are predicting a fourth. And the people that are leaving now tend to be on the liberal side and high-income earners. Katie Schneider fits that description. She moved to Washington State with her husband and 2 young kids after several years of rising gun violence. In back-to-back years, the city set records for homicides. One took place right next to her house. She says every person on her block has now left.
There was everybody moved, and it was because of all of these things. The school wasn't great. There was, all the unrest in Portland is, and it didn't feel like things were being managed.
In addition to record murders, Portland has also set new records for car theft with 11,000 and for vandalism with property damage of $19 million. Drug use is out of control. In 2021, the city gave out more than 6 million needles and 177,000 were picked up on the streets. These same problems are driving businesses away. Walmart is closing its only 2 stores in Portland this month, and Nike closed a huge store in the city over brazen shoplifting.
It's one thing to look at migration patterns and say, oh, tens of thousands of people are leaving this place, hundreds of thousands of people are leaving that place. Viewed on surface level and purely as a partisan dig, that's one thing, but if you delve deeper into it, the implications are quite severe here. It's not just a headline of a small percentage of the population that's leaving. It's potentially the collapse of Portland, Oregon. Sounds a little bit hyperbolic, but it's not. Take a look at history. Places like Detroit, for instance. Detroit was once the most vibrant place in America and possibly the most vibrant place in the world. This is a chart showing Detroit's population over the decades. From the 1920s to the 1950s, the population of Detroit doubled to nearly 2 million residents just in the core Detroit metro area. But over the last 70 years, we've seen a total population collapse. There remains roughly 600,000 people left in the Detroit area. And of course, most people know the end result because a population collapse equates directly to the collapse of the local economy. Now, Detroit is probably a much more severe example because, basically, the entire economy centered around building cars, and all the jobs in that specific sector went to Mexico and Ontario. Detroit's an extreme example, but what's happening in Portland is going to have the same kind of effects, especially if you consider who's leaving. Governing officials in Portland, Oregon have declared their priorities. They prioritize the homeless population and, frankly, the will of Antifa above the law-abiding citizen. Their streets have essentially devolved into utter chaos. Some describe it as a third world S-hole. And so clearly the net negative migration out of Portland is comprised mostly of the affluent tax-paying base and, of course, business owners. This is what these leftoids don't seem to understand. You could have all of these la-di-da socialist fairy tale ideas in your head that sound great on paper, but the question that I'm asking myself, especially in this instance, is how the frick can you pay for all of the social spending without a strong tax base? See, that's the thing. Western la-di-da liberalism and Western la-di-da socialism only exists if the economy is roaring. Places like San Francisco, for instance, one of the richest places on the planet. Well, it sounded nice on the surface, all those fancy entrepreneurs and tech workers adding billions of dollars into San Francisco tax coffers, creating a true liberal utopia that devolved just like Portland, the city essentially turning into a massive homeless shelter. And then, of course, comes the flight Affluent, tax-paying individuals and major corporations all moving to places like Austin. And then boom, seemingly overnight, San Francisco, which was supposedly the model city. The amount of times I've heard these Blue Ain't On Twitter liberals boasting about the success of major Democrat cities. The amount of times that I've heard that San Francisco is on its way to running a budget surplus. Well, that was an estimate at some point, but it didn't exactly age well. What budget surplus? Rising labor costs nearly erase cities' projected gains. New data shows how dire San Francisco's budget deficit could get as economic outlook sours. San Francisco has turned into a ghost town. While the rest of the country's real estate market was booming, San Francisco's housing market was stagnant because nobody wants to live there. Hundreds of thousands of people have fled California. And when tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people flee, cities and states very simply go broke. And now just take a look at what we're seeing in Oregon. A total inversion in the data. The estimates for Oregon were to grow by nearly 30,000 to 40,000 residents a year. That trend has completely flipped, and nearly 20,000 people in the year 2022 have decided to flee the Portland hellscape. And of course, the story that we covered previously, it's gotten so crazy that now even a good chunk of the eastern counties of the state want to secede and join and create new Greater Idaho. Of course, none of it is really surprising. Who in their right mind would want to move to Oregon when this is the kind of welcome that you receive when you move into your new neighborhood?
Vacuuming glass from grass. A huge pain in the absolute worst moment.
Just moved in, fresh to the neighborhood.
That Jake Kelly could have imagined.
The driver's side front window was bashed in.
Jake and his girlfriend discovered the damage Friday morning, along with dozens of other broken car windows.
So I come out, broken. Unbelievable.
Manuel Bernal made his feelings clear on the tarp covering his broken window, calling the vandals haters, cowards, and lazy.
Just people that are just ignorant. No respect for other people's property.
Most of the damage is scattered along Southeast 62nd on both sides of Foster and several other surrounding streets.
It's a no-brainer, folks. These cities, these states are going woke, and they are subsequently, very quickly, going broke. Meanwhile, Texas and Florida continue to boom beyond belief. There's no mystery here, folks. Republican states are winning the policy competition.
Imagine if mainstream media put this out. 7 o'clock, 11 o'clock news. Remember those days? Imagine that, though. How much more information we'd have and how much truth is out there. Well, that's enough of Portland. So I was going to do this show all on this banking fiasco. As I stated before, I don't know that much about banking. There's way too much to it. Very complicated. Unfortunately, this is a much bigger problem than the media is letting us know about. So I'm going to start off with Biden coming out and giving us an update on what's going on.
Before I leave for California, I want to briefly speak about what's happening in Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank. Today, thanks to the quick action of my administration over the past few days, Americans can have confidence that the banking system is safe. Your deposits will be there when you need them. Small businesses across the country, the deposit accounts at these banks can breathe easier knowing they'll be able to pay their workers and pay their bills. And their hardworking employees can breathe easier as well. Last week, when we learned of the problems of the banks and the impact they could have on jobs of small businesses and banking system overall, I instructed my team to act quickly to protect these interests. They've done that. On Friday, the government regulator in charge, the FDIC, took control of Silicon Valley Bank's assets. And over the weekend, it took control of Signature Bank's assets. Treasury Secretary Yellen and a team of banking regulators have taken action, immediate action. And here are the highlights. First, all customers who had deposits in these banks can rest assured they'll be protected and they'll have access to their money as of today. That includes small businesses across the country that bank there and need to make payroll, pay their bills, and stay open for business. No losses will, this is an important point, no losses will be borne by the taxpayers. Let me repeat that. No losses will be borne by the taxpayers. Instead, the money will come from the fees that banks pay into the Deposit Insurance Fund. Because of the actions of that because of the actions that our regulators have already taken, every American should feel confident that their deposits will be there if and when they need them. Second, the management of these banks will be fired. If the bank is taken over by FDIC, the people running the bank should not work there anymore. Third, investors in the banks will not be protected. They knowingly took a risk, and when the risk didn't pay off, investors lose their money. That's how capitalism works. And fourth, there are important questions of how these banks got into the circumstance in the first place. We must get the full accounting of what happened and why those responsible can be held accountable. In my administration, no one is above the law. And finally, we must reduce the risks of this happening again. During the Obama-Biden administration, we put in place tough requirements on banks like Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank, including the Dodd-Frank law to make sure that the crisis we saw in 2008 would not happen again. Unfortunately, the last administration rolled back some of these requirements. I'm going to ask Congress and the banking regulators to strengthen the rules for banks to make it less likely this kind of bank failure would happen again, and to protect American jobs and small businesses. Look, the bottom line is this. Americans can rest assured that our banking system is safe. Your deposits are safe. Let me also assure you, we will not stop at this. We'll do whatever is needed. On top of all of it, let's also take a look at a moment to put the situation in a broader context. We've made strong economic progress in the past 2 years. We've created more than 12 million new jobs, more jobs in 2 years than any president has ever created in a single 4-year term. Unemployment is below 4% for 14 straight months. Take-home pay for workers is going up, especially for lower and middle-income workers. And we've seen record numbers of people apply to start new businesses, more than 10 million of them, more than 10 million applications over the last 2 years starting businesses. Now we need to keep this progress going. That's what swift action that my administration over the past few years is all about. Protecting depositors, protecting the banking system, protecting the economic gains we've made together for the American people. Thank you, God bless you, and may God protect our troops. See you in California.
Mr. President, what do you know right now about why this happened? And can you assure Americans that there won't be a ripple effect?
Do you expect other banks to fail, Mr. President?
Should all depositors be protected at all banks?
All right, thank you, everybody. In town.
Well, I, for one, feel much better that Biden's in command and he's got this under control. I have nothing to fear, nothing to worry about. Well, in a way, I don't. When you live paycheck to paycheck, it's not like I have 50, 100, 200,000, 3 million in the bank and I could lose my mansion. So, but unfortunately, we have to pay for it. All of us hardworking Americans have to pay for this bailout. And to make things better, I have Steve Forbes. This is what mainstream media is throwing out. And again, this is Steve Forbes, and this is what we get to hear. So have a listen.
Two big bank failures are roiling the financial market. But here's why more trouble is coming. Hello, I'm Steve Forbes, and this is What's Ahead, where you get the insights you need to better navigate these turbulent times. The sudden, sensational collapse of Silicon Valley Bank, SVB, which had assets of over $200 billion, hit financial markets like an earthquake. Worries grow about the solvency of other banks, a fear fueled as a second large bank was shuttered on Sunday. Yes, these institutions made their particular mistakes, and this will be true of other enterprises, financial and commercial, that will be failing in coming months. But there is a far larger issue here. The blame for this mess lies squarely with the Federal Reserve and other central banks. Their big blunder, suppressing interest rates for years after the financial crisis of 2008-2009. With the connivance of their finance ministries, in America's case the Treasury Department, and the applause of too many politicians, the Fed and its fellow central bankers knocked down long-term rates by binge-buying government bonds as well as mortgages, and in some cases, other assets as well. For a while, interest rates in many places went negative. Never in human history had the cost of borrowing money been so low. But as economists should have known, suppressing the price of something distorts the marketplace. Former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers once remarked, perhaps indelicately, that there are two ways to destroy a city. One is bombing it, the other is to impose rent controls, which wrecks a normal housing market. What the Fed, the Bank of Japan, the Bank of England, and the European Central Bank did was to impose the equivalent of rent controls on the credit markets by purchasing trillions of dollars worth of debt securities. Countries' debts exploded. Politicians love being able to spend, and the cost of doing so not going up. It would be like a consumer putting $10,000 on his credit card and the monthly payments go down. Countless companies that could took on lots of debt. Then with the pandemic came an orgy of spending and corresponding money printing. But even before COVID-19, central banks were printing a lot of money. The combination of lockdowns and easy money set off a sensational and politically unpopular surge in prices, an inevitable but unanticipated escalation of inflation as central banks raising interest rates. Numerous companies borrowed more than they should have when the cost of money was ultra cheap. Some banks find themselves loaded with low-yielding loans and securities. That's why you should expect more disasters. For almost a whole generation, artificially low rates had people scrambling to get higher yields, taking on real risk. The solution is for governments to get their economies growing again, i.e., cutting tax rates, reducing regulations, curbing spending, and stabilizing the value of their currencies. All the things that the Biden administration and other governments are not doing. I'm Steve Forbes. Thanks for listening.
Well, there you have it. There's some truth to what he was saying, but unfortunately, Steve Forbes apparently voted that SVB Bank the best bank for the last 3 years in a row. So that tells you a lot right there. And apparently, this is not just a U.S. problem. Reuters, Europe, and we're going to talk about Credit Suisse and the effects that are taking place with the stock market in Europe because of all this banking calamity.
Shares in European banks tumbled again on Wednesday, dashing hopes that the storm had passed. By late morning, the region's stocks banking index was down around 6%. Credit Suisse was leading the way lower. The embattled Swiss bank saw its shares fall over 20%. It's faced a long series of scandals and seen huge outflows of capital. This week it admitted to finding material weaknesses in its past financial reporting. On Wednesday, its top investor, Saudi National Bank, said it couldn't put in any more money. The turmoil for the sector comes after the collapse of tech-focused lender Silicon Valley Bank. US regulators have tried to assure depositors that any cash held there or in other banks remains safe. There's now also talk of tighter regulation for lenders, but contagion fears have pummeled stocks for the whole sector. They also pose a dilemma for central bankers. The US Federal Reserve had been expected to hike rates again to tackle stubbornly high inflation. But some market watchers think those plans may now have to be revised for fear of sparking deeper trouble for banks.
If Larry was here right now, he would tell you this is now the reset of our banking institutions, going to digital currency. Governments will be able to turn on and off your money at will. They'll know everything that you're doing, meaning how you spend, what you spend, and what you pay for. The whole 9 yards. Unbelievable. And the crazy thing is, he's probably right. I found another little piece from England. Some guy, I am sorry, I don't know who he is, but apparently he's speaking to a large group of people, probably somebody in Parliament there, and he's explaining what's really going on with this banking. The most truthful speech you're going to probably hear about this. Have a listen.
It is my opinion that you do not really understand the concept of banking. All the banks are broke. Bank Santander, Deutsche Bank, Royal Bank of Scotland, they're all broke. And why are they broke? It isn't an act of God. It isn't some sort of tsunami. They're broke because we have a system called fractional reserve banking, which means that banks can lend money that they don't actually have. It's a criminal scandal, and it's been going on for too long. To add to that problem, you have moral hazard, a very significant moral hazard from the political sphere. And most of the problem starts in politics and central banks, which are part of the same political system. We have counterfeiting, sometimes called quantitative easing, but counterfeiting by any other name. The artificial printing of money, which if any ordinary person did, they'd go to prison for a very long time. And yet governments and central banks do it all the time. Central banks repress the amount of interest that rates are, so we don't have the real cost of money. And yet we blame the real retail banks for manipulating LIBOR. The sheer effrontery of this is quite astonishing. It's central banks that manipulate interest rates, Commissioner. And plus, underneath all this, we talk loosely, in a rather cavalier fashion, do we not, about deposit guarantees. So when banks go broke through their own incompetence and chicanery, the taxpayer picks up the tab. It's theft from the taxpayer. And until we start sending bankers, and I include central bankers and politicians, to prison for this outrage, it will continue.
I think after listening to this, we better start preparing. It's only going to get worse. Larry was right. That'll do it for the show today. I want to thank you for listening, and we'll have Larry with us next week because there's a lot more to this, and he's got a lot more to say about this and everything else in the world, and for that matter, the universe. So, take care. Keep looking for the elusive truth. We love you all. Stay together. Work together. And let's have some more peace and love because we are all tired of this doom and gloom. Bye-bye.